Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hello. Hi. So a very warm welcome to Sangha Night, and tonight we have Vadanya treating us with a talk on the Heart Sutra. But before that, I've just got an announcement, which is on Saturday, the 4th of March, so that's a week on Saturday, so next week, next Saturday, we're having a Sangha Works Day here at the Buddhist Centre. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that, it kind of has multiple purposes. The main one is, in some ways, is just to get together with the Sangha, do something really meaningful and enjoyable together, and connect through working together, through kind of building something together, through serving something beautiful together, which on this occasion, well, it's always something around the building. On this occasion, it's going to have a particular emphasis on spring cleaning and helping to insulate the centre. So kind of future-proofing it, hopefully for many, many more years to come, improving its energy efficiency, things like that. So it'd be really great if there's many people, many of you fancied coming along as possible. It's 10 o'clock, well, the work happens 10 till 1, I'm sure with a tea break at some point. And then there's lunch provided, so there'll be lunch provided, and then that'll be the end. So it's more of a morning with then lunch at the end. Somebody will be providing the delicious lunch for you. So yeah, it'd be really warm welcome to come to that. And we can really do a lot of good work together and have a good time together as well. Hand over to Vadanya.
Thank you. My mic's just fallen to pieces. Is it working? Yeah. It's just that it detached itself from its Bluetooth. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sangha Night again. Very nice to see so many people. Pranav Hridaya just talked about the Sangha Works Day happening on next Saturday morning. Well, after that, I'll mention it during my talk, but after that, next Saturday afternoon, I'll be running a workshop on chanting the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit, which is the Heart Sutra is what we're going to hear about now. So if you'd like to come to that, that would be great. And also another announcement, a bit more long term, starting on the 25th of March, Dharma Mai and I are going to be running a week-long, what we call an urban retreat. These urban retreats have gone worldwide, and we invented them. Yes. And it's an opportunity to get some of the benefits of a retreat while staying at home, basically. It's not a residential retreat, so a lot of people who've been on retreat will know that, it's great to go on retreat. You can really sort of move to a new level of practice on retreat. And, well, we can't always do that, so it's an attempt to get some of that while we are living our, as it were, normal life. And in some ways, that's even more productive than going on retreat, because that's stuff we can integrate into our normal life more easily. And what we do is we start with a full day, which Dharma Mai and I and a few other people will run, which is going to run from 10:30 till 5, okay? So that's the Saturday, the 25th of March. And then we'll round the whole thing up on the following Sunday, not the Sunday after, but a week on Sunday, a week Sunday. So it's just over a week. So anyway, we'll be announcing that again, but just to alert you to that, it would be great to see a lot of people. A lot of people get a lot out of these urban retreats. Okay, so the Heart Sutra. So as you'll know, we're partway through a series of Sangha Nights on Buddhist wisdom teachings. And so far we started out hearing about the teachings of the historical Buddha, conditioned co-production, the marks of conditioned existence. We could sum up these teachings by saying, well, they tell us that everything is radically transient, fleeting, and nothing is independent of everything else, basically. Nothing exists independently of what's around it. Everything sort of mutually co-creates, mutually conditions, So nothing has independent, unchanging self-nature. Nothing has its own essence. And in fact, there are no things. I keep saying thing, but there are no things. There are only interlinked, interdependent events or phenomena, which in reality have no boundaries, no real boundaries between them. Like us and the atmosphere, there's no real boundary. We're constantly taking it in and giving it out, us and others. Although for convenience, we give the reality, bits of it, names, which is quite useful because I can say, hey, Praniridaya, or whatever, rather than this bit of the great flux. So we heard about those teachings, those early teachings. Then we heard from Bodhinaga about how these ideas were developed by later Buddhists, and especially about what's called the Prajnaparamita tradition, and about the great teacher Nagarjuna, who was said in the tradition to have discovered the texts of the Prajnaparamita. So prajna, we've heard this already, but prajna means wisdom. Paramita is usually translated as perfection, but it could equally well be translated as something like the other shore or the beyond. So it's usually translated as the perfection of wisdom, prajnaparamita. But the great translator, Konza, who speaks much better Sanskrit than I do, usually often translate it as the wisdom of the beyond, or the wisdom that goes beyond, transcendental wisdom. It's the wisdom that helps us go beyond our small, limited self as we are now. And then last week, Paranita talked about some extracts from that big body of texts, from the Prajnaparamita literature to give us a taste of what it's like, what it's getting at. Which we may have found a bit baffling and a bit annoying. And if so, that's a really good thing. Because Konza, once again, the great translator, says, if the Prajnaparamita texts don't annoy us, they're not doing their job. Because they're supposed to be torpedoing our usual common sense ideas about things, which, of course, is profoundly annoying. So tonight, I'd like to take that exploration of the Prajnaparamita texts, started by Bodhinaga and continued by Paranita. I'd like to take it a bit further by talking about a particularly important Prajnaparamita Sutra. So important that we chant it every time we do a sevenfold puja. We chant it together. And that's the Heart Sutra. We call it the Heart Sutra. The full name of it translates as the heart of Prajnaparamita, the heart of transcendental wisdom, the heart of the perfection of wisdom. And the Heart Sutra aims to express, as its name says, the very heart of this perfection of wisdom teaching. It aims to sum up that whole Prajnaparamita tradition. The tradition contains many books, many long books, some short books. The Prajnaparamita in 80,000 lines, the Prajnaparamita in 100,000 lines, the Diamond Sutra, the sutra that cuts like a diamond, the Gathering of Jewels Sutra, etc., etc. There's lots of them. And the Heart Sutra condenses all these. It points to the very heart of it all. The essence. And it ends with the very essence of the essence, which we might find a bit surprising, but we'll get to that later. So because it's a condensed summary, the Heart Sutra still points at signposts, ideas that were explained at length elsewhere, argued at length elsewhere, and which were very, very familiar to the people it was aimed at, but may not be familiar to all of us. So I'll need to give a bit of background, but I won't be able to go into everything because not in a talk like this, or we'd be here all night, basically. And as I talk about the Heart Sutra, I'm often going to be referring to a translation by the Edward Conzer that I referred to earlier, as well as the translation that we normally chant, because Conzer's version is much closer to the original Sanskrit. The version we chant was designed for chanting, and it's really good to chant, but sometimes it's not very accurate, to be honest. And Conzer's translation begins with a line that we leave out in our chanting version. Om Namo Bhagavachai Arya Pranya Paramitayai, which could mean, I bow down to transcendent wisdom. I bow down to Pranya Paramita, the lovely, the holy. It could just as well mean, I bow down to the lovely lady Pranya Paramita, holy Pranya Paramita, because Pranya Paramita, as well as being a collection of texts on wisdom, is also a goddess, or better, an archetypal female personification, embodiment of wisdom, and she's very beautiful. And I'll pass that around. You could perhaps have a look at it. It's not a very good picture. It's the best I could do in about 10 minutes. So, Om Namo Bhagavachai Arya Pranya Paramitayai. Homage, I bow down to transcendent wisdom, the lovely, the holy, or I bow down to the lovely lady, holy Pranya Paramita. So we'll talk about Pranya Paramita, the embodiment of wisdom, in a later talk. But I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that our version, the version we chant, doesn't begin that way. Because that line is important. It tells us how we need to approach this sutra. It tells us the frame of mind we need to adopt to get any feeling for what it's about. To glimpse what the Heart Sutra is about, we need to start by bowing to it. We need to start by accepting that Pranya Paramita is greater and higher than our ideas and opinions, and approaching it with reverence. We're not going to master it with our intellect, as it were, the way we might master calculus, or the way we might master the teachings, the writings of some, say, social scientist. We're not going to master it by understanding it intellectually. It's not something we master. It's something we bow to. It's not something we can place ourselves above and say, I've mastered it. We need to place Pranya Paramita above us. And then after this line, after this first introductory line, setting this tone of reverence, in Conzer's translation, the sutra goes on to say, the holy Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara was coursing in the deep wisdom that has gone beyond. The version we chant just tells us that he was meditating deeply, which for me is nothing like so evocative. And actually is further from the original Sanskrit. So the Bodhisattva, the holy Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, was coursing in the deep wisdom that has gone beyond. So the speaker to this sutra, the person who's speaking this sutra, or the being that's speaking this sutra, is this Avalokiteshvara, an archetypal figure normally regarded as the embodiment or an embodiment of compassion. So that's important in itself. It's maybe a bit surprising that a sutra that's about wisdom is being delivered to us by a figure that's normally associated with compassion. The fact that we're hearing it from the Bodhisattva of compassion tells us that the sort of knowing that this sutra is about, is pointing at, has as much to do with the heart as it has to do with the head. We can't separate wisdom from compassion and all the other positive emotions. They are absolutely linked. And Avalokiteshvara isn't sitting down having a good think about the nature of things. No, he's not sitting down having a good think. He is coursing in the deep wisdom that has gone beyond. He's coursing in the deep wisdom that's gone beyond. He's on a higher level of being. He's coursing in a higher level of being than the one we normally inhabit, a higher realm or a higher dimension. And that's important as well. The source of these teachings is a higher level of being. It comes from a higher level of being, from another dimension. They're pointing to a vision. These teachings are pointing to a vision that we can only have at that higher level of being. They're not pointing something we can understand with our rational mind, at our normal level of being. At our normal level of being, we can sort of get a taste, a glimpse. We can get a sort of intuitive glimpse of that vision, I think, from the faculty that we call Shraddha, from a sort of intuitive heart knowledge that I sort of got a link to this and I know what this is about, but not at a level I can say A plus B equals C, or the gross national product of France is so-and-so. So Avalokiteshvara is coursing in the deep wisdom of the beyond. I should say that's much closer to the Sanskrit than the version we chant, because the version of the Sanskrit says he is moving, he's coursing. And I really like, he's coursing in that realm. I really like the word coursing. So he's coursing in the deep wisdom of the beyond, and the text goes on. He looked down and saw only the 5 skandhas, and that they were empty of own being. Wow, there's a lot there. So he's looking down. He's looking down from his higher realm. Sometimes Avalokiteshvara is described as a lord who looks down. He's deep, but he's looking down. Nice paradox there. He looks down with compassion on the suffering experienced in our lower realm of reality. And what he sees are the 5 skandhas. Okay, many of us are going to be familiar with the 5 skandhas, but for those who aren't, I've only got time to give you a sort of skim over what they are, a sketchy outline, because knowing all about the skandhas is not the central message of this sutra, but, I mean, to just hear the 5 skandhas and then have no idea what they are wouldn't be very easy to follow. So what are the 5 skandhas? It's a teaching taught by the Buddha as a way of dividing up our experience so that we can sort of look at it. And the first of the 5 skandhas is form, rupa, form. And note, this is not matter, right? Okay, it's not the same as matter, because matter is an assumption about the solidity of things. There's form even in a dream. There's form in a vision. So it's this stuff around us, form, whether we're dreaming it or whether it's real, and who knows which is true. The Dharma doesn't assume that we experience a solid reality any more while awake than while we're dreaming. Anyway, so rupa, form. And secondly, Vedana, usually translated as feeling. Actually, it's not sort of complicated emotions. It's more like, I like that or I don't like that. Sangha describes it as hedonic tone. It's a sort of feeling of liking or disliking that our experience gives us. And then the third, so rupa, Vedana, form, feeling. Samya is the next one in Sanskrit. Usually translated as perception, which I regard as profoundly misleading, actually. Because what samya really means is the way we take the sort of sense input, really complicated sense input we've got, and label it as things. So I see a sort of blue thing with a white, and I go, it's Pranyahridaya. I've labeled it as Pranyahridaya. You could see a sort of wiggly thing on the floor and go, oh my God, snake, or you could go, rope. It's that labeling function. So form, feeling, labeling, if you like. And then samskaras, deep volitional drives, deep habit energies built up over considerable time that drive the way we behave. So drive our whole life, really. And then finally, vijnana, which is usually translated as consciousness. And again, I think this is misleading because you can get the impression from Buddhism that consciousness is a bad thing from the translations that are used, which is actually not true. Vijnana means a particular sort of consciousness. It means divided consciousness. So the VI, is the same root as our word divide. It's divided consciousness. Jnana, without the V, means more like wisdom. But vijnana is that sort of consciousness that divides the world into you and me and the outside world, etc. So those are the 5 skandhas. And they're a way of dividing up our experience. And the Buddha taught this this analysis as a way of helping people to see that they didn't have a self that existed independently and permanently. So you would meditate on the skandhas and you would think, well, my feelings constantly changing, my form changes, different from what I was when I was a child, I'll be different again when I'm old. My feelings are constantly changing, my sanya is going on, all this is going on really quickly. So you would see all these different things. And there was also a meditation where you thought, well, is each of them me? So if it was me, if I was my form wouldn't cause me suffering because I'd be able to control it. Can I control my form? No. So it's not me, because anything is me, I can control. And what about all the others? So it's a way of deconstructing. It was taught as a meditation and a way of deconstructing our usual sense of having a fixed, solid, permanent self. So the skandhas were taught as a tool. They were taught as a tool. They were not taught in themselves as a teaching about the nature of reality. The Buddha's not saying this is the nature of reality, these 5 things. But in the centuries after the Buddha's death, there was a tendency to take some of the teachings very, very literally, certainly in certain quarters. And although the Buddha was very clear that words and ideas expressed in words could not actually not give us the experience of reality, people seem to have latched on to the idea that knowing about the skandhas meant that you knew about the nature of reality, that the skandhas were somehow real. They were the real thing. Self wasn't real, but the skandhas were real. So Avalokiteshvara is telling such folk that the skandhas don't have any more real independent existence than the ego or any other way we divide up the world. So this is not particularly important to us because we probably don't pay much attention to the skandhas, but so we'll maybe skip beyond that. So then we get some of the most famous lines in any Buddhist text. Here, so Avalokiteshvara is coursing in his deep wisdom of the beyond up there, and he says, here, Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is only emptiness, emptiness only form. So Shariputra is Avalokiteshvara talking to Shariputra. And Shariputra was an early disciple of the Buddha, who in later Buddhism often gets really, really unfairly cast as a sort of idiotic fall guy, basically. He's the guy who thinks the rules, there's all sorts of examples of this. It's really unfair on Shariputra. But he's cast as somebody who takes the teachings completely literally, too literally. And if he thinks he understands the teachings at an intellectual level, he thinks he's got it. That's who Shariputra is being cast as. He thinks he knows the nature of reality, if he knows that. So the sutra is a sort of dialogue. Sangha describes it as a dialogue between intellectual understanding, as represented by Shariputra, and deep spiritual insight that we get from a higher level of being as represented by Avalokiteshvara. And the first thing that Shariputra tells Shariputra is that form is only emptiness, emptiness only form. Emptiness here is a translation of the Sanskrit shunyata. And shunyata is this really central, hugely important concept in the Prajnaparamita tradition. It sort of sums up those related ideas that come down from the Buddha. Non-self, insubstantiality, transience, the connectedness of all phenomena, the fact that phenomena can't be separated out into individual bits, they're all happening together, influencing each other, that everything sort of depends on everything else, really. That interconnectedness, constantly changing, constantly interacting with the world, and that, of course, includes us. So firstly, that sort of non-self, insubstantiality, transience. And secondly, it sort of includes in it inconceivability. So inconceivability, interesting word, we can't conceive of the nature of things. It's not something we can conceive as an idea. You can't get at it with a concept. That's what it means. The true nature of things cannot be explained in words, cannot be captured or communicated in words and concepts. It can't be perceived by the rational concept-making intellect. And the Buddha was very clear about that. So, well, emptiness. Emptiness is a really bad translation for emptiness, actually. It's a really bad translation for shunyata, because it sounds so negative and it sounds so nihilistic. But in fact, it's highly positive. So there's a sutta in the Pali Canon, right back at the time of the Buddha, where the Buddha says, because I live in emptiness, I experience fullness, or I experienced abundance. So shunyata is actually positive. I've heard it suggested that it should be translated as simply the mystery. So form is the mystery. Form is only the mystery. The mystery is only form. We haven't got a clue what it is. So the word shunyata points to this interconnected world, which is a deep mystery beyond any of the intellectual boxes we could try to fit it into. So condensing a quote about this, somebody in a book called The Vision Quest in Early Mahayana says, a universe of glittering and quicksilver change is precisely one that can only be described as empty. Quicksilver, glittering change. It is the tool we use to dismantle the hard categories we use to impose upon reality, to reveal the eternal flowing possibility. Well, quite poetic. I'm not quite sure what it means, but anyway, if we get out of trying to get the universe into little boxes, there's something wonderful out there. So our ideas about the world, our concepts about the world, they stand in relation to the real world, to reality, the way that a map does to a landscape, or a recipe to the experience of eating a meal, or a description of the color blue learnt by heart by somebody who's been blind from birth. It's not the same thing. It's just words about something. It doesn't communicate it. And all too often we live in those ideas. We live in our ideas about the world rather than the reality itself. So we never taste the real landscape. We live in the map. We never taste the meal. We live in the recipe. We never see the sky. So Avalokiteshvara is telling us to stop reducing the mysterious, beautiful reality to the size of our ideas about it, to some grey ideas about it, and all the words we use to sort of trap it. There's an oak tree. That's a completely different experience from really seeing an oak tree. We can just turn everything into a diagram. And so the forms we see around us are not any of the things we think about them. That's what he's telling us. They're not what they think they are. They are emptiness, shunyata. They are this mystery, this wonderful mystery. And elsewhere in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the Buddha says, have I not said that whatever is empty is deep and infinite? So shunyata is pointing to the depth, the infinite mystery of things, not to some sort of vacuity. And he says form and the other skandhas are deep. They're deep and infinite. If we see them with the eyes of spiritual insight, the world is deep, infinite, mysterious. We haven't got a clue. We haven't got a clue what any of this is. We think we do, but we haven't. So form is only emptiness. But also emptiness is only form. Shunyata is not some sort of other place we can escape to. It's not that the world around us is unreal and we need to go somewhere else. We must live in the world of form. But at the same time, seeing it for the deep mystery that it is. So having told us that form is emptiness, Avalokiteshvara goes on to say the same, of course, is true about the other skandhas. It's also true of the various senses, including the mind and their respective sense fields, which is another way that the experience was divided up. So no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no color, sound, smell, taste, touch, or what the mind takes hold of. And it's not that these things don't have any existence. It's not that they're saying we don't have eyes, we don't have a nose, but they don't exist in the way we think they do. They have no separate, independent existence from the flux of everything. They're labels we put on arbitrary parts of reality. So he's done the skandhas and he's done the sense fields, and then alarmingly, Avalokiteshvara goes on to give the same treatment to the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and the 12 links of becoming on the wheel of life, the really central teachings of Buddhism. What? They're all empty. They're just words and ideas. They are tools, skillful means in themselves. They don't tell us about the nature of things. We must use them, but we don't get trapped by them. We don't take them literally as a description of the way things are, or we end up like the caricature of Shariputra. The Buddha described his teachings as a raft to get us to the other shore. We don't leap off the raft midstream, but also once we've got to the other shore, we don't carry the raft around with us. So we don't get trapped in ideas we take literally. And then Avalokiteshvara goes on. So know that the Bodhisattva, relying on nothing whatever, but dwelling in prajna wisdom, is freed from delusive hindrance, rid of the fear bred by it, and reaches clearest nirvana. All Buddhas of past and present, Buddhas of future time, using this prajna wisdom, come to full and perfect vision. Well, that's us told. If we can break out of the ideas that we use to sort of create a self and protect ourselves from everything else and get the world nicely tied up in boxes and actually live in the flowing, interconnected world where we're part of everything and we're part of everyone, then that's the way to nirvana. That's the way all the Buddhas of the past have attained enlightenment, and it's the way we will attain enlightenment if we do. And then the sutra changes tone. Suddenly it changes tone. Suddenly the idea of mantra is introduced, and we're in the realm of the non-rational, the beyond rational. In Konza's translation, we hear Therefore know that the Prajnaparamita is the great mantra of knowledge, the uttermost mantra, the mantra that is like no other, the cure for all suffering, the truth. What could possibly go wrong? It goes like this. Gate gate para samgate bodhisvaha, which could be translated as gone, gone, gone beyond, gone completely beyond. Awake, all is well. And then the sutra ends with a line, this is the very heart of perfect wisdom. So what can we take from all of that? How is that relevant to us and our practice? What are the takeaways? Well, one takeaway is definitely not that we should take the teachings of the Dharma, the words and ideas of the Dharma, any less seriously than we do, or practice them with any less vigor than we already do. The Buddha described the teachings as a raft. Rafts are really good for getting across rivers. If you leap off the raft in the middle of the river, because it's only a raft, that's really stupid. It's a map. Again, the Dharma is a map. It's not the reality it maps, but it's a map. And it's a better map than our usual maps. We need a good map. If we don't have a good map, we set off for enlightenment, we end up in Pitsmore somewhere, I don't know, Grimethorpe. We need a good map. We need a map to tell us where to go, but we don't want to mistake the reality for the map. Nagarjuna, the great teacher Nagarjuna, who is said to have founded Prajnaparamita, distinguishes between conventional and absolute truth. So he says the Dharma is conventional truth. Anything expressed in words can be at best conventional truth. It's not the absolute truth. That you can only get by the vision, the sort of vision that Avalokiteshvara has. But you've got to have it. You need it. You need it. We use words to go beyond words, to reach the pure wordless vision. So it's not that we should disregard the teachings of the Dharma because we've been told they're all empty. And it's not that we should abandon our intellect and become someone who believes everything they read on the web, for example. It's not that. It's not that. But it is, one of the things we could take away from it is remember that words and ideas are not reality. They do not describe reality. They're partial at best. We should get out. We should get out of the world of words. I mean, we're surrounded by words and ideas, inundated with them online, especially. But just we can often live in this world of words and ideas and ideologies, and we need to get out of. If we want to have reality, we need to get out of the world of words and ideas and ideologies as much as we can. Spend time in the real. This. Nature, for example. Spend time in nature. Spend time not thinking about things, but just experiencing things. Spend time experiencing the beauty of the world. Spend time experiencing the peace of meditation. And sit light to our opinions. We can get so tied up. They're just one of the ways we bolster ourselves. Sit tight to our opinions. Any opinion or idea that can be expressed in words is, as Avalokiteshvara tells us, at best partial truth. It's never the whole truth. So get out of words and into the real. And he's also telling us to remember that we should never think we've got things completely sorted out with our ideas. We can think we've got the world sorted out. I mean, I think it's quite natural. We're educated to think reality is this way. And we then believe it. But we haven't got things sorted out with our rational mind. We can't completely understand the nature of reality. And especially, we should never think that the mainstream view that everything comes down to matter, and that mind is much less important than matter just produced by it, that we're sort of like machines living in a dead world. We shouldn't buy into that. That's just a set of ideas. It's a really good set of ideas for building bridges and aeroplanes. And if somebody's going to build an aeroplane that I'm going to fly in, I want them to use that set of ideas. I really do not. Well, I've just got this feeling it's going to fly. Or I just got this hunch. No, but that's not the way that we get at spiritual reality. It's a really good way of predicting how matter's going to behave. But we then extend it to this completely other realm and think it's explained everything. Science tells us if you can't measure it, you can't take it into account. So we then think, well, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. Well, that's a leap. That's a big leap. So yeah, step back a bit from that whole explanation of things and be open to the idea that actually the world is a mystery. Actually, the world is a mystery. We don't know what it's all about. So we don't abandon the intellect, but we do see its limits. That's what the prajna paramita is about. It's about taking the intellect to the limit that it can go to and then seeing that's as far as it goes. So if we can't do it with the intellect, are we stuck? Is that it? We're stuck. Well, actually, no, because the sutra gives us a clue as to why not. I said it ends with the essence of the essence, and the sutra ends with a mantra. Reality, Avalokiteshvara, if you like, can communicate to us in ways other than language. Reality can give us ways of knowing that aren't just about the head. They're about the heart as well and the intuition. We can, if we want to know about the nature of reality, we know that as we might know a person. Or as we might know that something is beautiful, that play of light on water is beautiful. We don't know a person by knowing their phone number, their bank account, the statistics about them. There's something about we got a taste of them. We know them. We feel their presence. We don't know. We can't know that play of water on that river is beautiful or that sunset is beautiful with our rational mind. Our rational mind just goes, well, it's just a bit of reflection, a bit of refraction. But we know it. We know it's beautiful. We know that something beautiful about the nature of reality is communicating itself to us through that particular event. Reality can communicate to us often more effectively in non-rational ways, like a mantra. And that might seem completely bonkers, but it's not. So there. It's not in lots of people's experience, actually. So that would be my final takeaway. Be open to the ways reality communicates a higher vision to us. Don't dismiss things like mantra or archetypal figures like Avalokiteshvara because we think we've got the world sorted out and they couldn't possibly exist. They don't fit in with our ideas. From that point of view, well, it's all nonsense, but it's not. So that would be my final takeaway. Be open to the ways reality communicates a higher vision to us in ways that aren't just purely rational. The beauty of the world, the feeling we get in mantra, archetypal images and what they seem to communicate to us. And even a sutra in itself can act like a sort of mantra. Many people I know have responded to the Heart Sutra without knowing what it means. I know somebody who is now an order member, who was a Cambridge maths lecturer, who just heard the Heart Sutra, couldn't have had a clue what it was about, but thought there's something really deep and meaningful here. And that something communicates itself at a sort of intangible, intuitive level. And he just knew he was a Buddhist from that point on. And I think that's not an uncommon experience to think there's something about this that communicates something. It's almost like it's a mantra itself. So if you've got a bit of that, you might want to come and learn to chant it in Sanskrit, which will happen next Saturday at 2 p.m. till 5. Okay. Thanks very much.